Everyone, thank you for joining us today. What I plan to do today is go through the solicitation and give you our rationale behind what we asked for, and then take any questions. Alice, I'm assuming you're there as well?
Yes, I am.
Okay, excellent. Who do we have on from the CAE team?
We have Valerie. We have Jill, Ashley. I think John's joining us on the phone. I think Jason might be here. And I'm still looking.
Okay. All right. So we should have plenty of people here to answer any questions you all might come up with. But if you come up with something that stumps us, we'll follow up with an email. Cassandra, am I okay to go ahead and share my screen? And
yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. Can you guys see the slides?
Yes.
Let me try and get into presentation mode here. No, I don't want it over there. Okay, that'll do. So what I wanted to do is just walk through with you where we intend to go with all of this in the context of the greater program. And then if you wouldn't mind, if you would hold your questions till the end, what we're going to try and do is capture the questions and the answers and create a FAQ document that we can put on the web for anyone who might have missed this session or the one we're going to do on Friday. So if you've all read the solicitation, you know that there are the first 4 initiatives that we discussed have to do with the K-12 pipeline. And if you attended our strategic planning symposium earlier this year, you might remember that K-12 was one of the primary things that we talked about during that session. And what we are trying to do with this initiative is to expand on what we started in fiscal year 2020 grant cycle. So you all, if you've attended the sessions we did last fall, where each of the initiative leads briefed their programs, then you're familiar with what we are doing with the Ring K-12 project. If you're not familiar with that effort, those sessions were recorded and are available. You can review them, ask any questions that you care to ask. But the Ring initiative was funded on a 2-year grant. So their rough timeline is preparing all the materials this fiscal year with plans to start the program online in the fall of 21. There are several moving parts to that initiative, and I don't know that they'll all start up at the same time, but we should be in full swing by the beginning of the next academic year. But what happens is that as things are written right now, that project will come to a screeching halt at the end of fiscal year 22, which means in the summer after the first year of actually teaching classes. And what we wanted to do this year was increase the capacity to the point where the program will continue on past the end of fiscal year 22. It will give us an opportunity to look at what we like about what we're doing, anything that needs tweaking, where we need to go from here. And so the first initiative has to do with development of additional curriculum. And that would be focused on the 8th and 9th grade student population, integrated into what's being created right now. So in essence, we're working backwards from the high school audience to capture that next level down. We want to be sure that what's developed under this initiative can be integrated with what's being done now. and so that it becomes one continuous program. From a CAE point of view, what we want this to become is a true pathway for students from high school into the CAE programs. So one of the things that the current grant includes is collaborating with all of you in the CAE program for potential either articulation from this class into your programs, or even dual credit, or some other credit sharing arrangement. And so what we eventually want to get to, and we think we might get there with this, is to have college preparatory high school program in the next couple of years that will help get students into curriculum that can then carry them into university. So many of you are familiar with CISA's efforts in this area and cyber.org, and we're working closely with them, trying to ensure that we're not all duplicating effort. And our focus is on college preparatory materials for this project. We're also working with Department of Ed on continuing on the CTE project. We started with them a few years ago, and we will be partnering with them on some CTE summer programs that they initiated this year with teachers, and helping fund that so that that effort continues as well. And that will be, besides our partnership with Gen Cyber, that will be our big investment in this environment going forward. The second part of this is to increase the ring capacity, because the funding in the first iteration really was focused on building the program and getting it off the ground. We want to carry that initiative on into the fiscal years beyond this. So while the curriculum grant will only be a one-year grant, the capacity grant will be for 2 years, which will get us to the end of fiscal year 23. So in 22, what we would want to do is broaden the capacity of the current program so that we can have capacity for more students. And that inevitably brings up the question of teachers, and I'll talk about that next. But we want to make it available to as broad an audience as possible with this next infusion of funding. Right now, the target audience is rural school students, homeschooled students, and students in areas where they have lower resources and don't have access to cybersecurity education. Our vision is that when students go to either our partner Department of Education summer programs, or they go to Gen Cyber, or they go to any other summer program, they would be made aware of this opportunity. And then if they need additional development and support, or they're interested in pursuing education, that they could come into Ring and qualify for this program, which is why we want to expand the capacity. The third part of this, of the first part of the solicitation, is for high school teacher development. We're not necessarily, we didn't call it Ring teacher capacity building because we want to have a broader impact. We recognize that there are other needs for high school teachers beyond just the CAE effort. And so this would be a generic development of high school teachers. But you'll see in the solicitation, we want them to be familiar with what we're doing in Ring, but we also want them to be aware of what cyber.org is doing and what some other programs are doing and the resources associated with those programs. And then the last part has to do with collaborating at the state level, because any of you that have worked in K-12 education know that every state has their own rules. And we in the CAE program don't have the authority to confer high school credit on a student in their state. The state will have to recognize this program as meeting their state requirements for education. So what we want from this last effort is regional leads who will reach out to the states in each region and work on getting the RING project and our high school outreach approved within the state for credit. That will mean that could be that one of the hubs wants to take that on, or it could be a school in a region, or it could be a group of schools in a region. The ultimate objective is for every state in that region to have someone from the CAE program collaborating with them and the ringleaders. I just now realized the leaders of the RING project would have access and assistance in getting that program approved within the state. You'll notice in the solicitation that we weighted the awards in each region. That's because, for instance, the Northeast region has significantly more states in their region than, say, the Southwest region. And the Northwest, the Southwest and the Northwest regions will have to deal with Hawaii and Alaska, respectively. So we tried to make ratio funding available for each of those regions. So let me move on to the next. We have had, Art Conklin has led the effort for years maintaining our current KU list, and has done that very well, and has been an excellent partner with the program office to ensure that things are consistent, that if the community has input to updating our existing KUs, that there's a mechanism to do that. And they will continue to do that job as they're currently funded to do. What we want to recognize with this next effort is that there is a whole range of new subjects and gaps between what we have in our current KUs and what is in the NICE framework and what is in other standards for academic development. And so what we want to do is look at where are we right now. There are lots of changes going on with the NICE framework. And so I imagine that this committee will have to be involved in some degree with those changes that are going on in the NICE framework. I don't expect that they're going to be making major changes to the way it's organized. Originally, they were going to take out what level was it that they were going to, the categories. They were going to eliminate the categories, and then they realized recently that that's not going to be possible. They're going to need to keep the categories. So this group will need to look at how that's evolving, but the real fundamental part of the NICE framework is the scope of work roles that are defined in the framework versus the KU topics that we have that feed into those knowledge areas that are identified for each of those work roles. And so I think that in the end, we're going to come up with a gap study that says, this is what we know about what the full range ought to be. This is what's in there now. This is where we stand with the University of Houston effort to manage the KUs and maintain the wiki. And here's what we recommend for development of new KUs. And then hopefully that committee would be able to recommend to the program management office new topics that need to be covered, and as much as possible framed in the framework that we've already developed for what content needs to go into each KU. And then that will all get blended into our future KU management process. What I would like to see in the future is that we maintain the effort that ART has been doing, and we broaden their task to include continuous development of new KUs, so that in the spring area, as you see there in that timeline, the community can come to the program office and say, this is what we recommend for changes in the coming academic year. We would have time to do coordination amongst our federal partners and within NSA, and that at the end of the summer, we would publish the revised updated list of the KUs for the next year. And our standing agreement with the community as regards redesignation or new schools preparing their applications is that that list becomes a guide for the current year and is required 1 year after 1 year. So in other words, if a school started preparing their either new application or redesignation application, and in the fall, they're ready to apply and we publish a new KU list, they would not be obliged to make any changes to their application until the following year. Although that new KU list would be in effect for any new curriculum development or new program development or those kinds of things. We're also aware that because of technologies evolving and what's currently in Clark and potentially in the new directory that we have currently out on grant, we want to do several things. We are looking for a group to, and we're calling it the Curriculum Committee. What we want out of that is that we do a survey, a comprehensive survey of both what's in Clark, what's available across the community, either because schools have developed curriculum and are willing to share it, or because the government has paid to have curriculum developed. We want this committee to look at other materials that the community may be willing to contribute. For instance, on a previous curriculum grant, we collected a lot of materials that weren't, for one reason or another, made available in Clark. We want to do a refresh of those materials and look at, of those materials that are available, what still is current and needs to be incorporated into Clark and the new directory. And at that point, then we want to do a gap analysis. We want the committee to compare what the group building new KUs is doing. We want to look at what's currently available. And then we also want this group to look at what is in the framework and say what's missing. The solicitation calls for this group to either develop or subaward to someone to develop at least 5 new curriculum material, 5 new sets of curriculum material on subjects not currently available. So I don't want to pay for more of what we've already got. I want to have new materials developed. That survey that we're asking them to do would also include any materials being developed for the faculty development program that might be generally available to the CAE community, so that we have a full and comprehensive inventory of what's already out there and then we look towards developing what's missing. We might, if we only can afford to do 5 of a list of 20 this year, then we might look in future years to invest in further development, depending on where this goes. But this is one of the reasons that throughout you'll see that we're looking for all of these proposals to be executed in collaboration with us and with our other federal partners, so that we remain mindful of what's being done throughout the community. You've all probably noticed that the federal government has gotten very interested in cybersecurity education, and outside of NSA and the CAE program, there is a lot of money being invested in development of education. And we want to, as much as possible, avoid duplicating something someone else is already doing, assuming that our quality requirements are met. Okay. So we've had a CAE summer program that's been run out of NSA for the last going on 5 years. We'd like to create a new CAE-CD summer program. We'd like to develop that new program over the next roughly year and execute that in the summer of 2023. Once we've been through what I consider to be a pilot summer program, then we will subsume that into the program office and manage that program side by side with the CO summer program. So this is very much going to be a collaborative effort. We're coming to the community for this because I think those of you that teach in cyber defense are best suited for helping us design what a good summer program will look like. I would like to have it similar to CO in that there is both an academic and a practical application of learning, and that students in the summer program have the opportunity to be exposed to career environments, whether that's in industry or at NSA or with any of our federal partners. As we develop this over the next year, we will engage both our partners at NSA and our other federal partners to see how much we can offer opportunities to such a group of students. But otherwise, in terms of the content, what we should be focusing on, how we would recruit and select students, what the standards ought to be, and so on, we want the community to be engaged in with us. And quite honestly, we want you all doing the heavy lifting. But how that program gets developed and what it looks like will be largely up to the group that takes this project on. This one is a departure from what we've done in the past. It's really framed around the idea of what NICE did a couple of years ago with their RAMPS grants. We want to demonstrate from a CAE point of view the power of the CAE schools in terms of influencing your communities. We think that the CAE community represents a lot of strength and dedication to cybersecurity and organizational prowess to offer the nation leadership in community development. And so these programs, we will award one in each of the regions, but schools within that region can work with the local communities and with local industries to come up with proposals that address one of these 3 models. The first model would be that you want to work with your local schools and your local community. If you're active in K-12 education, you're probably already doing something like this. But what we're looking for is a robust K-12 cybersecurity education program that would be done in collaboration with your local schools and your local government, and hopefully with industry, so that you could have career development counseling and perhaps summer internships or some kind of familiarization program that students can participate in your community, if you choose that path. The second one would be the potential that, like has been done in many states around the nation, you would work with your local government and your local industry to develop cybersecurity as an economic development factor in a community. So perhaps there's a community that has workforce that is no longer fully utilized, either due to COVID or because of manufacturing changes in the community. And retraining a workforce into cyber could be something that could be leveraged for economic development in that community. And we'd like to leverage the CAEs to be able to do that. The third option has been done in some communities already. What we're looking for is something along the lines of a larger regional coalition that might involve multiple states, where you perhaps have a shared power grid or some other resource that if one state has a problem, multiple states have a problem. And you want to help organize a coalition that will look at how to address that particular issue. So, let's say you have multiple states that share a power grid. What happens if there's a major impact to that power grid, be it a natural disaster or some kind of cyber attack? What are the recovery protocols? What are the state's authorities? What are local authorities? How does the Guard fit in? What kind of training and education needs to go on for that? Excuse me, for that coalition to be effective? And how can the CAEs help influence that and get that organized? What we're looking for at the end of the first grant period, which would be the summer of 2023, would be some kind of commitment letter from the participants in that effort on the parts of either the state and local governments or the school system and or industry that are involved, that would attest that should we have the funding and invest in a third option year for this grant, that local coalition can carry on the work once that grant expires. And that is the primary driver behind wanting this to not just be a CAE effort, but for it to be a coalition effort where the state and local governments and industry may not have the wherewithal to launch the effort, but with our investment in the first 2 years, they might be ready to bridge that program in the third year and make it become a local funded and managed effort after that. So in order for us to execute a third year option on a grant, we would have to have that commitment letter no later than 60 days prior to the expiration on the period of performance of the grant. But that gives you a full 22 months of the grant to work out that arrangement and acquire that commitment letter. If your partners would be willing to provide a commitment letter sooner than that, then the better off we'll be and the more likely we can provide a third year funding on this grant. So that's my prepared notes. What I'd like to do is open it to questions and hopefully get Alice and maybe a few other people doing some talking so I can get my throat sorted out. I'm going to end my slideshow. And put us back into, so Cassandra, how would you like to manage questions and answers?
So it looks like we're already starting to get a couple of questions in the chat. And since we are documenting all of these questions so that we can submit that later on, we do appreciate if you guys can submit your questions that way. And we can start working through them and seeing who would like to answer these questions. The first one is from Alfredo, and it says, in Puerto Rico, we do not have community colleges. Will it be a problem to submit a coalition proposal for this RFP? We are very much interested to participate in the K through 12 activities, such as teacher development, etc. They're very active in K through 12 activities, workshops, cybersecurity certifications through Gen Cyber and among others. So it sounds like really the heart of the question is that they don't have the community colleges there.
In that case, I think that there are actually a couple of other states where that's true. And if that's the case, I would say that we can accept that. You would just have to iterate in the proposal that that's the situation in your local area. For the efforts that are more regionally based, you could perhaps have partners in other states and draw your population of teachers from those other states as well. But it would mean that you would have to be doing a certain amount of virtual training for that to be possible. Does that answer the question? Alice, would you have any other answer to that?
Nope, that's what I would have answered.
Okie dokie. Alice and I share a brain about 60% of the time, so don't be surprised if I give you an answer and she modifies that slightly. All right. If you wanted to participate, was that the next question? Oh no, wait.
No, it's
For the curriculum committee formation and development, the solicitation says one lead institution, at least 2 others, including a community college. Any insight on what should be the right size of that group? I would like to see not a large coalition. I honestly don't know what the best working size for that is. It depends on what you want to propose in terms of how you would approach the effort. For instance, if you view the committee as just kind of directing efforts, and once you establish your baseline, you're going to engage other schools to participate in some way, then I would say you can keep it small. If you expect the bulk of the work to be done by the actual committee, then I would say you probably want at least 5 or 6 schools engaged, because there's going to be a fair amount of heavy lifting early on when we're doing the survey of what's out there and organizing all your information. So the requirement is that there are at least 3, one of them being a community college, but you're certainly welcome to make more than that. Alice?
yeah, no, I think set the coalition to what you can manage. You know, do you want to be actually working on the project or managing 25 coalition partners? I know what I would want.
And I think the next question kind of goes to that. If you want to participate in the curriculum committee, should you form a team or just submit a single proposal? I would say if you have others that you have worked with and you can just let them know you're interested, that's one possibility. I don't know if, so let me take it from the other point of view. If you're interested in chairing that, but you don't necessarily have a preconceived notion of who you would like to be involved with you, you could send a note out to other schools through your regional hub, or you could potentially work with the CAE community to send a note out and say, I'm interested in chairing the committee, who's interested in working with us. You know, I think some of you did that last year when we were forming the coalition grants, and that worked well for most of you. Alice?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, you can just say agree. I'm going to ask you if I answer correctly every time, and you could just say thumbs up. Okay. Who should we contact to find out if there are groups of folks working on a coalition? We have not appointed anyone to be the keeper of who's working on what. I would say do what I just said, or if you have a group of other CAEs that you're comfortable working with, depending on what you're doing, you might want to work cross regions. So if you're in one of the regions, you want to lead a committee, you might contact schools in one of the other regions or two of the other regions, so that you have nice geographic separation and representing diverse specialties, so that, you know, you might want to look at the list of who's designated a research school, who's designated in one of the other categories, so that you have a wide variety of partners. But we don't have anybody directing traffic, right?
Correct.
Okay. If we have a cybersecurity community development project in its beginning stages, could that be a candidate for 21-8? Yeah, if you've already organized and you've got an established group, and you think that this funding would take you to the next level, I would certainly not rule that out. What we would have to be cognizant of is that I can't give you money to do something someone else is already paying you to do. So the effort that we're funding would have to be an addition or broadening something that you're already doing. But certainly if you have, let's say you have a community development project and you have industry as a partner, and you've already got community buy-in, and our funding will allow you to accelerate that effort, then certainly we would consider that. Alice?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we just can't pay, like Lynn said, we can't pay for something that somebody else has already paid for. But if you were to come in and say, okay, so and so paid for us to get to here, we think that we can get to here with this funding, that would be acceptable. So you're building upon a project that's already in place or currently being put in place.
Okay. Do all of the members of the curriculum committee have to be CAEs? I would say yes to that. Unless you can give me a good reason why you would want to engage someone outside of the community. One of the perks to being part of the CAE community is that you get to participate in these kinds of efforts. And schools that have not invested in that or have not been qualified to invest, I would not be inclined to include in that effort. Alice?
That is correct. I would totally agree with that, because you're also looking at those that are not in the CAE program may not know the lingo, may not know what we're looking for or what the community's looking for. So there would probably be a learning curve to bring that institution or group or whatever, or member up to speed, and you could be wasting valuable grant time on that.
Yeah. Something about port security. I lost that one. For the Critical Infrastructure Coalition, would port or maritime protection be a good area to build a coalition around? I would say yes. What we would be looking for in that kind of regional coalition would be some type of critical infrastructure that would be common to the participants in the coalition. So yeah, port security, like I said, power grids, large industry, medical, you know, a lot of our communities have large medical, healthcare kinds of systems. You know, anything like that that has need of cybersecurity planning and assistance would be acceptable. Double checking that all funded PI staff and students must be citizens or permanent residents. Alice,
Yes,
you did the research on this.
That is correct.
This is a requirement that has existed for some time, but of late, the Secretary of Defense is enforcing this heavily. We've had a couple of memos in this regard come down to us since we gave our last grant. And so that's a fundamental requirement now. Idaho National Labs has a multi-pronged effort underway on critical infrastructure security education. A lot of CAEs are connected to that effort. Is that on your horizon for the critical infrastructure part? I was not aware of that, Art, but certainly if there's something coming out of that that you could leverage, focused on a specific community or regional area, we would be willing to listen to that. For initiative 21-7, must the pilot program be in summer 23, or could there be a mini pilot in summer 22 with a follow-on in 23? Certainly anyone that's willing to overachieve on what we've said is the minimum standards, we'd be happy to entertain. I just wouldn't want you to set yourself up for failure where you committed to something that you can't deliver. So certainly if you have the resources and you're already in a place where you think you could be ready to go in 22, I'd love to do that. Historically, if we've started, now bear in mind that even though we are talking about this in the middle of the winter, our business office nothing has changed. And so it could well be August. If you'll see on most of my slides, I assumed August as the start point on these efforts. And it could well be August before any grants are truly finalized. We can hope for sooner, but I can't promise it. So that's why in our requirement, we tried to allow plenty of planning time, because if you don't get the grant until August, I didn't want to penalize somebody and rush them into performing earlier than you could reasonably be ready to do that. Okay, thanks, Art. You can do that. Other questions? Wow, I'm learning to speak academic better than I did a couple of years ago.
So Lynn, I just wanted to bring one thing up, that we got a new requirement that I'll be sending a note out either later today or tomorrow through the NIETP tool, as long as it's working, that we will need grantees to identify their current and future grant activities. only for federal or DoD work. So our
DoD
grants
must not be federal.
well,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
in my world, federal is NSF and because of the scholarship programs. But any federal grant that the PI, co-PI, program director, or co-program director are currently on. So our grants office just kind of wants to get an idea of what everybody's level of effort is. And also it's a good routine activity to make sure you're not overextending yourself, because we don't want that to happen.
Okay. Thanks, Alice.
Correct, Jim. That's current and pending.
I have a locally HQ Ed coalition,
Headquartered.
headquartered coalition that has a global coalition on critical infrastructure. I'm assuming that's okay. Yeah, I don't know why not. When you say one coalition, would you consider multiple coalitions with smaller budgets? I'm not sure what part of figure 1 you're talking about, Amberine. Oh, I know what you mean. Okay. So when we receive the proposals, we will go through and we will grade the proposals based on how closely do they meet the requirements as laid out in the solicitation, and the schools involved, and can we expect that there will be a reasonably good expectation of a good return on our investment. And then we'll look at budgets and funding levels. If we can afford more than one proposal and we have competing excellent proposals, as we usually do, inevitably in any solicitation cycle, we have more opportunities to fund things we would like to fund than we have money to fund them. So we will not rule out the possibility where I said we were going to award one that we wouldn't award two. That figure is meant more to say that we will do at least what's in that chart for each of those items. So I would say if you formed a smaller coalition and didn't need the full amount that was offered in the solicitation, that might make it easier for us to fund more than one. Amberine, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Are institutions permitted to submit proposals for more than one initiative? Yes. We may not fund you for more than one, but you can submit for whichever ones you're interested in and think you qualify for. I would say if you're submitting multiple proposals, or you're submitting proposals on multiple initiatives, that you address in each of those proposals your availability to work on both. So that we know if we like two of them, we could fund two of them, or if you had a preference, you would only work on one, or whatever. If you're hedging your bets, we still have to account for, as Alice said, the time that you've committed to for other projects, and whether or not you're released from teaching, and what is the impact on your ability to perform on the grant. Did I answer that right, Alice?
Yeah, so if you are an institution that holds one designation, say you're a CAE-CD, you can submit one proposal for each of the, I believe it's 8 initiatives. If you hold a designation in each of the CD, R, and CO, your CAE-CD can submit one proposal with each of the 8 initiatives. Your CO program can submit one proposal or one submission with a response to the 8 initiatives, and same for R. What you can't do is come in and say, okay, I'm designated as a CAE-CD, and I'm going to submit 5 different proposals for the first initiative. So I hope that made sense.
Thanks, Alice.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if each initiative. Oh, so let me answer that this way. If you are a CAE-CD and you submit a response for each of the 8 initiatives, each PI can be different as long as they're tied somehow to that CAE program. That could be that the point of contact that we have in the NIETP tool is an advisor or is aware of the project, because what we have had happen in the past is schools have sent our proposal out across campus,
Our
and
solicitation.
yeah, the solicitation, and we got proposals who we thought were supported by the CAE program on campus, but come to find out the school kind of pulled a fast one on us, and we didn't realize that. So we want to make sure, because you guys are CAEs, that you are getting this carrot and not others on the on campus. So to go back to what Lynn said, if you have a submission for each of the 8 initiatives and say 3 of them have the same PI, that PI would have to identify their commitment for each one. And that's what goes back to that list of what are the current grants and things like that. So if you submit a proposal for each of the 8 initiatives and each initiative has a different PI, co-PI, you're going to be submitting a lot of information, because that's all that stuff's going to have to be submitted for each initiative.